That was a long ride up here from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but now here we are in Vicksburg, ready to plow into more history.
Plow into history? Did he really just say that? Does he think we're going to let him near earthworks in a tractor?
Please, plow into history. They can't even start this thing.
Welcome, welcome everybody. Man, we're on another trip again, and I can't believe we're here, and we have you to thank for it. The members and supporters of the American Battlefield Trust keep sending us to places so that we are able to record video and bring them to you, and hopefully you'll come to these places. I'm Garry Adelman. We got Kris White behind the camera. We got Mackowski waiting in the wings, and we're gonna go crazy and go all over the place. We are at Vicksburg, Mississippi, and we are overlooking the mighty Mississippi, the father of waters, something that people struggled to describe even. It's the spinal cord of 19th century America. For the Mississippi, Sherman said, I would slay millions, and on that point I am not only insane but mad. The nailhead that holds the Confederacy together, the worth 40 Richmonds, the Mississippi River. And here we are at Vicksburg, and we're not just going to do Vicksburg on this trip. We're going to be in Vicksburg proper. We're going to be on the battlefield. We're going to cover some of the campaign. We're going to cover Port Hudson, and you'll see a little bit further south of there as well. So we have lots to do. So with no further ado, let me bring on Kris Mackowski. He's a fellow, a Copey Hill Fellow with the American Battlefield Trust, and of course, co-founder with Kris White of Emerging Civil War. Kris, good to be here with you.
I am so excited to be in Vicksburg, and this is going to be just an incredible video swing. We're going to see one of the major turning points of the Civil War. We're going to talk about how that fits to other actions going on here. As you know, Ulysses S. Grant has had a great string of victories through 1862 using these waterways as spears into the hearts of Confederate territory. And as he does that, that allows him to advance his armies further and further south. And so finally he sets his eyes here on the interior of Mississippi. He's going to try to come down through an overland route, but a raid on his supplies at Holly Springs in December of '62 is going to force him to fall back. As a result, the other spear of that advance under William T. Sherman coming down through Chickasaw Bayou in the northern part of Vicksburg is going to run into grief because John Pemberton, the commander here in Vicksburg, is able to shift reinforcements to meet that were opposing Grant down here to then oppose Sherman. The ramifications of that particular federal defeat are huge because, on December 26th, it's just days away from the unveiling of the Emancipation Proclamation. Abraham Lincoln has to have battlefield victories to give the Emancipation Proclamation teeth, and he doesn't get one here. And after the loss at Fredericksburg earlier in the month, this is a huge setback for Lincoln's hopes with the Emancipation Proclamation. Grant is going to withdraw. He's going to retrench, come up with some other ideas, try to come down here. He's going to make a total of 7 different attempts on Vicksburg. He's going to try to use the Yazoo River to get in. He's going to try to swing in on the Mississippi. He's going to try to bypass the Mississippi. One thing we're going to talk about is just what a vital role the Mississippi plays in everything that happens here. But you can see the remnants of a bend in the Mississippi behind me here. My friend Kris White's going to come on in just a second to talk about that. But that bend is really what makes makes Vicksburg so problematic. Grant's going to try to cut the end of this isthmus off. Think about the Mississippi going up and around your finger. He's going to try to cut things off of the canal. That's not going to work. He's going to try to dig other canals and flood bayous that'll let him take barges through this swampy area in Louisiana on the far shore. That's not going to work. Lincoln will profess to have patience with Grant, saying that so long as he keeps trying, I'm going to have patience. But by the spring of '63, Lincoln's patience is going to start to wear thin, and Grant's going to know he's going to run out of time if he doesn't crack this nut soon. So eventually what he's going to do is come up with a plan to get him past Vicksburg on the far bank, cross the river, and then stab into the interior of the state in what my friend Tim Smith calls his interior campaign, his inland campaign. And over the course of the first few days of May of 1863, Grant is going to fight battles at Port Gibson. He's going to fight battles at Grand Gulf, actually, a failed naval battle at Grand Gulf, but he'll still capture it anyway because he outflanks it. That's going to give him a supply base, a good line of communication to the Mississippi, the Louisiana bank. He's going to fight a battle at Raymond. He's going to fight a battle at Jackson. He's going to fight a big battle at Champion Hill, and he's going to fight a battle at the Big Black River that'll finally bring him to Vicksburg from the east. But in order for that to be effective, he still has to have help from that water side of the city. Siege isn't going to work if Confederates can still use the Mississippi. So again, that watery thread that's going to run through this whole story. And to talk about just how important that is and why it's successful, I want to bring on my great friend, Kris White.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Gary, behind the camera. And thanks to everybody who's watching. Please click the subscribe button, hit that bell notification, and please share this with your friends and family. Head over to battlefields.org to learn more about what we do here and to watch our Vicksburg animated maps to learn more about this campaign and to download our free Vicksburg Battle app. So to get you oriented to where we're standing, we're actually on the northernmost portion of the Confederate defensive line here at Vicksburg. The line of fortifications, which runs for roughly 9 miles, has 9 fortifications on it, and we're standing at Fort Hill. If you've come along the Vicksburg driving tour, you'll be going on your way to the USS Cairo, and you'll see this large fort sitting up on a hill. So as you come past it, you would actually stand up and you could stand here and see below us the Vicksburg National Cemetery. Some 17,000 United States soldiers are buried in Vicksburg National Cemetery. Just beyond it, and you can't see it through the trees, is the USS Cairo Museum. That is to a gunboat that I'll talk about here in a moment. Off to the west, we'll have the state of Louisiana, and then down towards the southwest of where we're standing, we'll have the city of Vicksburg. Wartime population of about approximately 5,000 people. During the battle itself and siege, probably about 4,000 people are living here, but this is the second largest city in the state at the outbreak of the Civil War. And in fact, Mississippi is the wealthiest state in the Southern Confederacy. Most people wouldn't think that today, but King Cotton is down here. We have chattel slavery, we have the river, we have all kinds of different industries that are helping to fuel that Mississippi economy. That won't be the way after the war, though. So as Chris pointed out, Mackowski, I'm not speaking in the third person, we have to try to make our way up and down the Mississippi if we are the Federal Army, the United States Navy. And what we have to figure out is how are we going to open up this riverway? Well, we send a flotilla up the Mississippi River from the Gulf of Mexico, and that'll be led by David Glasgow Farragut. And Farragut in April of 1862 takes the city of New Orleans, Louisiana, which is the largest city in the Southern Confederacy. Coming downriver on June 6, 1862, we see their own D-Day themselves, and that'll be the city of Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis Falls. And now we're starting to move in from two sides along the Mississippi, but there are strong points at places called Vicksburg and down at Port Hudson. It's about 150 miles between the 2 points, but this 150 or so mile stretch is going to open up the Trans-Mississippi, or the beyond the Mississippi. And we're not looking at the Mississippi right here, I know that, but it's beyond the Mississippi River. What you're looking at is the Yazoo Diversionary Canal. In 1863, this was the Mississippi River. In 1876, April of 1876, there's a great flood that comes through here, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and it changes the course of the river. So what we need to do is, if we're the United States Navy, we need to open up the Mississippi River, because the Midwestern farmers want to get their goods down the Great River to New Orleans and then out to the world. We also need to cut off that Trans-Mississippi. We'll have Arkansas lead coming in from there. We'll have corn, we'll have cattle coming in from Texas. We'll also have other goods coming from the deep south across the Mississippi River and then out to the Eastern Confederacy. And that's going to help to supply the Confederacy. And war is honestly about economics, it's about politics, it's about a lot of different things, not just mud, blood, and water out here. So let's take a look for a moment, though. How are we going to try to break crack this city open? Up the river will come David Glasgow Farragut and his deep water ships, which aren't meant to come up the Mississippi. They come up here in May of 1862. They threaten to bombard the city. There's some blustering going on. There's somebody in the city who says Mississippians don't know the word surrender. They'll eventually figure that out in July of 1863, but at this point, they're not going to surrender. Farragut doesn't have a substantial enough force of infantry with him. He only has about 3,000 men to try to take the city. So that doesn't work. Well, we're going to try some other things that Kris was talking about, but eventually, in April of 1863, I'm sorry, Ulysses S. Grant meets with his naval counterpart, a guy named David Dixon Porter, a lifetime seaman, and he is a guy who is in charge of the Mississippi River Squadron. And Porter meets with Grant, and both of these men are energetic officers. They both have been trying time and time again to break open Vicksburg. Well, Grant, he's tried a lot of different things. Nathan Bedford Forrest has thwarted him. Earl Van Dorn, that Lothario, has thwarted him. Mother Nature has thwarted him. Time and time again, Grant can't make it here. And then the Confederates at Chickasaw Bayou to the north of us have thwarted him in December of 1862. So now what do? Grant approaches Porter and he says, I want to run your gunboats with a few transports past the guns of Vicksburg. Up here on Fort Hill, the substantial fort would overlook the bend in the river. And that bend once sat right up here where you can see these ships, as Gary's pointing out. You see some industry up there. That's the old bend in the Mississippi River. Unfortunately for the Federals, there was a piece of land, a peninsula of land known as DeSoto Point, which made for you coming down the river, the Mississippi, you'd have to turn kind of northward and then turn towards the east and then eventually towards the south. It's a winding river. The Mississippi is not on a straight line. In fact, if you look closely at Google Maps or Google Earth, you'll see this thing zigzags up and down the river. It has a mind of its own, a course of its own. So Porter listens to him, is like, man, I don't know about this one. And eventually Grant talks him into it. But what Porter will tell Grant is, once I get those boats south of there, I can't get them back upriver, because if they can't take Vicksburg, it's going to be tough. The current of the Mississippi was about 3 miles an hour. On average, it was about 9 to 12 feet deep, depending on where you are on the Mississippi River. It runs for 2,350 miles, and its deepest point is actually at Algiers, south of New Orleans, at 200 feet deep. Today, the river has a different course, it has different depths, but this was a tough river and a very treacherous river to actually come up and down. In 1838, there's a Steamboat Act that has to kind of start to oversee steamboats coming up and down the river because there's so many sinkings along the Mississippi. So it's treacherous nonetheless with Mother Nature. Now, down below us, along the road that's below us, you might be able to pick out some of the bio down there, and you might also be able to pick out a road with some cars going on it. That is where 38 heavy guns of water batteries overseen by Tennessee and Louisiana soldiers will defend the Vicksburg waterfront. Fort Hill's impressive, but it can only give plunging fire down into the river. Those water batteries, which will be down towards the gun levels and the water levels of the guns, can actually hull the ships, meaning hit into the sides of the ships, and that's what you need to do to sink a ship. So on April 16th, 1863, Porter decides that he's going to try to run down past the guns of Vicksburg. As he starts to come down here, his ships can make about 6 knots. You add to the river flow that night, probably another 3-ish miles an hour. Maybe they can do 10 knots, just about 10 miles an hour. They will come down the far bend of DeSoto Point. They will start to move their way up and around, and things at first seem to go well. For the first 6 minutes in front of the water batteries, nothing happens. Confederates are at a ball, or most of their officers are. Word gets back to the mansion where they're all partying that here comes some Yankees. Flares start going up in the night, and then the water batteries start to open up, and the greatest pyrotechnics display up until this time takes place here on the Mississippi, here near Vicksburg. Porter's guns batter their way down past this city, and it takes 2.5 hours to run past Vicksburg. Once they make it out the other side, they had lost 1 ship, the Henry Clay, a transport. Porter's boats had made it downriver. They go down to Hard Times Landing, where they meet up with Grant's forces that have been led down that side of the riverbank, the Louisiana side, and now they can ferry troops across at Bruinsburg. A few days later, on April 22nd, 1863, another flotilla comes down here. And now we have another pyrotechnics display, but these are troop transport ships packed with goods, coal, anything else that you need to get down to Hard Times Landing for that crossing that will take place on April 30th. These guns, though, these ships are transports, and they don't have any guns. And as they go past, they just have to go as fast as they can, hugging the Mississippi shoreline where we're standing, so that the Confederates won't be able to effectively fire into these sides of these ships, because they're so close. The batteries are just a little too high. man, it's going to be they won't make as easy targets as you would think. Still, one of those transports are lost, but one man said it was so bright out there with all the pyrotechnics going off that you could read the newspaper sitting on one of the decks of the ships. Those guns are run, and then we'll have others that will come down through here. The USS Cincinnati will be felled out in this river, but now, with these ships going downstream, that enables Grant to start his inland campaign and move troops across and into Mississippi from Louisiana and keep pushing on. Now, as I pointed out, the Mississippi has changed course. DeSoto Point used to be out behind us. The Mississippi used to be out behind us. In April of 1876, a great flood came through this area and did exactly what Ulysses S. Grant couldn't do, and that was bypass DeSoto Point, which they tried to do with a canal. And that is going to change the course of the Mississippi River. And in fact, that is also going to economically devastate this city. Because what happened was the Mississippi flowed away from the port of Vicksburg. And now that great port can't carry goods up and down the river. We will have railroads coming through here, and that's another reason why it's so key to seize this position. Railroads coming through here in 1863. But by 1876, the Mississippi's gone the other way. And for the next 25 years, the United States Army Corps of Engineers work to create the Yazoo Diversionary Canal, and that's what you're looking at. They divert the Yazoo River, and they're going to move it, or the Yazoo, down this way, and the Yazoo is going to move past Vicksburg today. So if you're standing on the bluffs at Vicksburg, which are very high and dominating, as you can tell, you're not looking at the Mississippi River. In fact, you have to go to the casino south of here and the roads that lead across it to actually get across the half-mile wide Mississippi River as you're going to try to get over to Louisiana. And then what you're looking out is Centennial Lake, is what you're looking out in that direction, basically now turned into large wetlands. So if you come down here to Vicksburg, the course of the river has changed, and that was 1876. Again, it economically devastated this city. But up the Yazoo will go the USS Cairo, and we'll talk about that at another tour stop, and you'll enjoy that visit there. If you've never seen it, it's a U.S. gunboat that was sunk on the river on December 12, 1862, and one of the only gunboats you'll ever see anywhere. So it's a really neat display. Gentlemen, Kris Mackowski looks like he's ready to jump on camera.
Only, Kris, just to kind of pass a quick softball to you as we wrap things up, because we're going to talk about Navy in a second, but you talk about how Grant and Porter are not, they're both energetic officers. They didn't have to work with one another, though. And the fact that they do, Grant recognizes the value of the Navy recognizes the value of infantry support. That is a revolutionary relationship that changes the course of this war.
Yeah, what we look at are combined arms down here. We see the United States Navy who are coming out here. They are working hand in hand with the United States Army. The Navy, the Army, they have to work with one another because you need supplies and you need to have these ships to bring supplies up and down the Mississippi. Conversely, to keep the Mississippi open, because this is what we call a brown water Navy out here, blue water navies are in deep waters. Think of the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, aircraft carriers, battleships today. But in 1863, to move up and down these rivers, the large ships like the seagoing ships like the USS Hartford, the flagship of David Glasgow Farragut, making its way up the Mississippi, it looks comical. And it's tough to move up and down. So we need to get shallow draft ships at 6-foot drafts so that they can go across sandbars and go across mud bars and make their way up and down here. But it's confined space. So if you don't control the riverbanks, the Confederates can then fire down, put obstructions in the river, fire down on these ships. It's a tough place to be. And it's energetically overseen by Grant and Porter, these two men. So this is going to open up some of the great studies today for our military staff rides, because we can take a look at how these two combined arms worked. Conversely, let me add one more thing to that. They also had clear-cut goals set down by their commander-in-chief. Take Vicksburg, open up the Mississippi River. Also take Port Hudson. Conversely, on the Confederate side, you had a split chain of command in many ways. Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy, will eventually appoint a man out here to defend Vicksburg named John C. Pemberton. He's from the Gwinnett Valley of Pennsylvania, just outside of Philadelphia. He's friends with George Gordon Meade, a West Point graduate of the class of 1838, I believe. And Pemberton is looked at sideways because he's a Yankee, and they don't want to deal with him. But Pemberton doesn't have control of the troops across the Mississippi River. fact, Theophilus Holmes and then Earl Van Dorn and others control those men across the Trans-Mississippi. So if he needs help, he can't just say, hey, bring troops in from Louisiana or Arkansas or elsewhere. His hands are tied. He's also going to get later on another man to come out west named Joseph Johnston. Johnston will take over for Albert Sidney Johnston, who was killed at the Battle of Shiloh. And for about 9 months, we don't have a commander in the Western Theater. Jefferson Davis comes out here. He brings Joseph Eggleston Johnston with him, and Johnston is going to be, hopefully be Pemberton's savior. Pemberton has 33,000, 35,000 men here around Vicksburg to defend the city. That's not enough because he's going to take on an army of Grant's that rises to the number of 77,000. Unfortunately for Pemberton, who's not the man for the job, and he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, he has Davis who says, man, protect that place at all costs. Defend the streets if you have to. And Joe Johnston, who loves to retreat, get the heck out of there. Move, move, move. Who do you listen to? The superior officer or your commander-in-chief? And Pemberton will lean towards the commander-in-chief. And that is going to pull him in a rock in a hard place because Johnston is not an active commander and he's not going to come out here and save Pemberton. Davis expects Pemberton to defend this city, and Pemberton's not the man. And in fact, West Point tells you to be an active defender. Make a sully out and go and attack the opposing forces. Try to make it as difficult as possible to attack. And quite frankly, Pemberton sits back here in Vicksburg and lets Porter, and he lets Sherman, and he lets Grant do all the maneuvering around him. And when he finally does come out to fight at a place called Champion Hill, it's far too little, far too late.
And I think that's a great point. Thanks, Kris. You know, this idea of initiative is something that you could say Pemberton surrendered to the Union long before he surrendered his army. I want to just say, I think in closing, that we're looking so forward to taking you along on our journey. We might split up a little bit, but you can already see we're talking about different things than we usually do. We're going to go to places where we've never shot video in this swing format before. We're going to be talking about the Navy. We're talking about that being on the edge of a department, which, you know, brings in the Trans-Mississippi and things on the other sides and whatnot. So we are looking so forward to going to these places with you. Again, share it with your friends. And, you know, at the same time, we're hitting a lot of other things that have 160s this year. Look for Chancellorsville 160. Look for Gettysburg 160. Look for Brandy Station 160. Look for maybe Mine Run and Bristow Station 160 coverage, all because you enable us to be able to come out into the field and cover these things. So I know you'll tell us how you feel in the comments, so I don't have to ask for that. But we do ask you to share this with your friends. And thank you so much for sending us out here, for helping us to preserve America's battlefields and to educate and inform the public about what happened at these places and why it matters.